A very good morning, respected Emeritus Chairperson Sir, esteemed faculty member, colleagues and dear residents. I welcome you all today for this CCR by Department of Geriatric Medicine. If we talk about our department, we started our services on 2nd March this month and we are located in main building ground floor medicine area. And we have 10 dedicated beds available in both male and female ward and provide ICU extension as per the requirement. If we talk about geriatric medicine in India, we have 2 national centers of aging and 19 regional geriatric centers. Out of them, one is located in Jodhpur, Rajasthan, and right now 18 medical colleges in India offer MD in geriatric medicine with total 48 seats. And I am proud to say our institute is the first private medical college in North India to establish the department. It shows our institute's commitment towards providing comprehensive care for older adults, promoting healthy aging, and also upholding institutional dedication for the well-being of older adults as a part of our core value system. If we talk about scope of services, we provide preventive services through vaccination, fall prevention, osteoporosis, cognitive and cancer screening. We also provide integrated screening of major intensive capacity domains. We manage acute conditions like communicable disease and non-communicable disease and provide day care to ICU services as per the requirement. We also provide interdepartmental referrals to medical and surgical departments. We manage chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, COPD, CAD, and we also do comprehensive care for geriatric giants like frailty, sarcopenia, immobility, dementia, etc. We manage polypharmacy and prescription optimization if the patient is visiting multiple departments for their well-being. We do functional and cognitive rehabilitation for the dementia and sarcopenia, etc. And we also do anorexia of aging management. We provide end-of-life care to our patient through symptom relief and advanced care planning. If we talk about activities, we are active in patient care, education and research. We are doing daily OPDs and we have achieved consistent patient flow and we are admitting patients in general ward to ICU. Sir, right now we are seeing 3 to 4 follow-up patients and 1 to 2 new patients, sir. And we have reached till 15 patients per day. And we are also doing geriatric oncology assessment conducted prior and during therapy for the cancer patient. We are doing referral services extended to medical and surgical department, and we are actively participating in outreach activities and medical camps. These are some of the glimpses from outreach activities. These are some of the pictures from the academic and professional activities. We are fortunate to represent our department in multiple universities and we are active in writing also, and we have recently submitted a case report in international journal, and there is one ongoing study on older adult vaccination in our department. We are also supervising 2 MOT student thesis in geriatric medicine. And recently we also got prize for podium presentation in geriatric oncology conclave in Bengaluru, and we are actively participating in academic and conference to keep ourselves up to date. If we talk about the department progress, we are in right now phase 1 and we are doing public awareness, inter-departmental coordination, geriatric references, and already started dedicated OPD and admission services. Right now we are trying to optimize the geriatric care pathway and enroll in government health stream, as we know that our government provides health cover to all the patients, those who are above the age of 70. Our next plan is to expand through the dedicated geriatric medicine ward and day care and to provide integrate the physiotherapy, dietitian, geriatric nurses and clinical psychologists into our team. We are also plan to introduce multiple academic programs and will expand into specialty clinic like cold and syncope clinic, memory clinic and geriatric oncology with the help of subspecialties. We also plan to expand into digital health so that we can provide telehealth to our geriatric patients. And our goal is to achieve a center of excellence in the field of geriatrics, and later we can also go into transitional care and assisted living for step down, long term and supportive elder care. With this introduction, today we will present an interesting case presented to us 3 months ago, a case of 70-year-old female in bedridden condition. This is not an unusual or a unique case. Most of us have seen cases like this. This is the approach, how we dealt with it, how we manage it, and I'm sure we will have good take-home message at the end of this hour. And for this, I would like to call Dr. Ayushi to take forward the case.
Today, we are going to present our CCR of a 70-year-old right-handed homemaker female resident of Nohar with known case of bilateral osteoarthritis, knee and hypertension. She was maintaining her usual activity of daily living till 6 months back, now presented with the complaint of recurrent fall for 6 months. Her first fall was occurred 6 months ago. It was witnessed by her son. She slept on wet floor with no pre-fall dizziness, blackout or aura. She remembered the entire event. She supported herself with her right palm while touching ground and no head trauma occurred. She was able to get up and walk immediately after the fall. Since then, she developed fear of falling and started using wooden cane for walking. Second fall occurred 3.5 months ago. It was witnessed by her grandson while going to bedroom from living room after watching TV. Before fall, she felt vision is getting dark. Grandson saw her falling and supported her. She doesn't remember falling. When she gained consciousness, after 1 to 2 minutes, she was on the bed. There was no history of tongue bite, facial deviation, headache, incontinence and abnormal body movement. Third fall occurred 3 months ago. It was unwitnessed while going to toilet. On the way, she felt sudden dizziness and fell down with a loud sound. Son came immediately after hearing the fall. Patient's right side and head were touching the ground. She gained consciousness within about 5 minutes. She felt pain in right hip area and right side of head and was not able to walk. 2 days after the last episode of fall, she went to local hospital for the complaint, where NCCT head was done, which was normal. X-ray bilateral hip and pelvis was done, where no obvious fracture was found. X-ray knee was done, suggestive of bilateral osteoarthritis, for which surgery was advised but denied by the son. She was discharged with expectant management in form of rest and NSAIDs for pain relief, but she could not walk for next 3 months till presentation to our institute. So we have a patient with history of 3 falls in 6 months and she is bedridden for 3 months, presented to MGH on 11th of July. On detailed evaluation, we found she complained of dizziness for 5 months that was insidious in onset, gradually progressive. She described it as lightheadedness and darkening of vision. 2 episodes of loss of consciousness in last 5 months as described in fall event, with each episode recovered within 5 minutes, and these episodes usually occur on rising from lying posture, appears within 1 to 2 minutes of standing and relieved by lying down. There was no history of similar episode during neck movement, no history of diaphoresis, palpitation and chest pain, no history of headache, vomiting or change in hearing or vision. She also complained of pain while swallowing for 5 months that was insidious in onset and gradually progressive. It was burning in nature, localized to throat and oral cavity. While taking both solids and liquid, it increases with intake of hot and spicy food with no relieving factor. She also complained of decreased appetite with subjective weight loss, no regurgitation, food sticking, heartburn, hoarseness and cough. No history of fever and night sweats was present. She also had lower back pain for 3 months that was sudden onset, dull aching since the last fall. It was gradually progressive with increasing intensity and now continuous in nature. She developed radiating pain in bilateral buttocks and thigh, more in the right side with no tingling, numbness or weakness with normal bowel and bladder function. No history of memory complaints or change in behavior, seizures or tremor, stiffness, focal neurological deficit, slowness or vision and hearing impairment or palpitation, EEG, angina, pedal edema, shortness of breath or cough, hemoptysis, night sweats or pain in small joints, alopecia, rashes or dryness of mouth or pain abdomen, yellow discoloration or bleeding or tingling or burning of feet or numbness. There was no history of tuberculosis, any malignancy, diabetes and thyroid disorder. She is known case of bilateral osteoarthritis knee for 2.5 years, hypertension for 2 years. She has undergone hysterectomy 25 years ago for abnormal uterine bleeding. Patient is chronic tobacco user in form of Naswar, which is powdered dry tobacco snuffed intranasally 5 to 6 times daily for past 30 years and denies any other addiction. Patient consumes vegetarian diet. However, she complained of decreased appetite such that Earlier, she was having 3 chapatis, now consuming only 1 chapati. Bladder habits was normal and there was decreased bowel movement. She does not receive any adult vaccine. So far, we have a patient with recurrent fall and bedridden along with postural dizziness, odynophagia, lower backache with radiculopathy, pilated osteoarthritis, knee and hypertension. Is that it? Or there is always more to the story. As there are multiple complaints which limit the mobility of patient, we assess the functionality status by following tools, IADL and BADL. IADL is used to evaluate independent living in society and independent activity of daily living, and BADL is basic activity of daily living. Basic activity of daily living. In our patient, only 2 functions in basic activity of daily living is preserved, that she is able to feed himself and her bowel and bladder were continent. So, we can say that patient's functional status has severe impairment. To find out the reason behind the limited functionality, other than the presenting complaint, we have to assess patient in detail and we will follow the validated comprehensive geriatric assessment tools. Now we'll start with the nutritional assessment using MNA. MNA is Mini Nutritional Assessment Scale, that is 4 out of 14, suggestive of malnourishment. Geriatric depression scale was calculated, that was 10 by 15, suggestive of moderate depression. Clinical frailty score was 7, that implies that patient is completely dependent for personal care, living with severe frailty. Since patient is bedridden, so unable to perform TUG score. TUG score is used for mobility of the patient. SARCOF is a screening tool for sarcopenia, which is 8 out of 10, suggests that patient is at risk of sarcopenia. Polypharmacy and potentially inappropriate medications was present. Polypharmacy is the use of more than 5 drugs, including prescribed, over-the-counter and all other drugs. We use Beer's criteria to identify potentially inappropriate medication. When we take the treatment history of patient, we know that patient is having 11 drugs, so polypharmacy is present. Can you identify which are potentially inappropriate medication? Yes. So according to the Beer's criteria category, prazosin, etoricoxib, clonazepam and diclofenac are to be avoided in adults, and pantoprazole and prednisolone are to be used with caution. So in comprehensive geriatric assessment, we found that patient is malnourished with moderate depression and severe frailty with impaired mobility. Patient is at risk of sarcopenia and polypharmacy with potentially inappropriate medications are present. On examination, patient is conscious, oriented to time, place and person. Her vitals were normal, pallor was present and nails were spoon-shaped. There was grade 1 pressure sore is present at the sacral area. Since patient has complained of difficulty in swallowing, we checked her oral cavity and we found there was white creamy plaques over posterior tongue, inner cheeks and oropharyngeal wall with multiple shallow irregular ulcers having erythematous base on tongue and buccal mucosa with multiple tooth missing with dental caries. On systemic examination, cardiovascular system, S1 and S2 heart sounds are hard with no murmur or carotid buoy. On respiratory system, parietal air entry is present and on per-abdominal examination, soft and non-tender. On neurological examination, power is normal except at knee extensor with generalized muscle wasting. Tone was normal at all joints except bilateral knees with normal sensory system. On musculoskeletal examination, bilateral knee valgus deformity is present, more pronounced on the right side with medial joint line tenderness. Patellar grind test was positive, and when we examine range of motion, on right side it is 0 to 120 degree and on left side it is 0 to 130 degree with painful terminal restriction with no flexure contracture. On lumbosacral spine examination, straight leg raise test was positive bilaterally and Faber test reproduced the lower back pain. So after clinical history and examination, we have a 70-year-old female tobacco user, known case of hypertension, bilated osteoarthritis, knee and chronic constipation. Now presented with recurrent fall in 6 months, postural dizziness and odynophagia for 5 months, lower backache with radicular pain and bed confined for 3 months. On examination, pallor, koilonychia, oral candidiasis with grade 1 sacral pressure sore was present. There was generalized decreased muscle mass with decreased power in knee extensor along with these geriatric syndrome. For further case discussion, I would like to invite Dr. Diksha.
Thank you, Dr. Ayushi. I will be discussing the case further. So, what is causing falls? Why recurrent fall? Is it due to a single or multifactorial etiology? It could be due to syncope, anemia or other causes. In the syncope, why syncope? Because in the last 2 fall, there is a history of transient loss of consciousness with a self-recovery within 1 to 2 minutes. Syncope could be due to orthostatic hypotension, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, cardiogenic syncope or the vasovagal syncope. So, for the orthostatic hypotension, we check BP in our patient in the supine position after standing 1 minute and after 3 minutes of standing, and we notice a drop of 20 mmHg in the systolic BP and 10 mmHg in the diastolic BP, which is suggestive of orthostatic hypotension. So, other causes, POTS and vasovagal was ruled out because in our patient tachycardia was not present, and in the vasovagal syncope there is a history of bradycardia with the postural hypotension which was not present in our patient. So, for the orthostatic hypotension, we have 3 causes: primary autonomic failure, it could be due to secondary autonomic failure or drugs. For the primary autonomic failure, as per the history, there was no feature suggestive of Parkinsonism, cerebellar dysfunction or Lewy body dementia. So we rule out the primary autonomic failure. For the secondary autonomic failure, causes could be due to vitamin B12 deficiency, diabetes, hypothyroidism, adrenal insufficiency, CKD, CLD. So we did the basic investigation to rule out these causes and all the labs were within normal levels. So we ruled out the secondary autonomic failure. Now we left with the drugs. As our patient is taking prazosin and clonazepam, prazosin which is an alpha-1 receptor blocker and clonazepam is a benzodiazepine. Both are the category 1 drug in the Beats criteria and potential cause for the orthostatic hypotension. So, other cause could be cardiogenic. Although our clinical history do not suggest cardiogenic syncope, but there is always a possibility of cardiogenic syncope in this patient. So, we did a ECG and 2D echo to rule out the structural and arrhythmia cause, and we found our patient has normal ECG and 2D echo. So, the cardiogenic syncope is ruled out. And other causes could be due to anemia, either nutritional or anemia of chronic disease. As our patient has pallor present in general physical examination, so we did a basic anemia workup which is suggestive of severe iron deficiency anemia. Other causes of recurrent fall could be due to chronic SDH or vertebral insufficiency, which will be discussed later. In the musculoskeletal causes, could musculoskeletal system also play a role in the recurrent fall? In this, first we discuss about osteoporosis. For the osteoporosis, we did a DEXA scan in our patient. In the DEXA scan, suggestive of there is a T score of minus 2.6 standard deviation in the neck of femur, and in the L1 vertebra, T score was minus 4.6 standard deviation, which is suggestive of severe osteoporosis. So, to assess the fracture risk in this patient, we did a frac stool assessment and we found patient is a very high risk of fracture, mostly in the hip fracture. And to rule out the other causes of osteoporosis, we did a vitamin D test, parathormone, calcium and phosphate level, which was normal limit. For the other causes likely due to lumbar spondylitis and osteoarthritis knee, we need an imaging. So I would like to invite Dr. Anjali Yadav from Department of Radiodiagnosis to discuss the case further.
The patient was referred to us for NCCT head vertebral artery Doppler with complaints of history of recurrent fall due to postural dizziness for past 6 months, history of head trauma 3 months back. NCCT head was done. Axial and coronal section of brain shows ventricular system and extra axial CSF spaces are prominent due to age-related cerebral atrophy. Gray-white matter differentiation was maintained. There was no evidence of any space-occupied lesion, no evidence of any extraaxial or intraaxial hemorrhage, and no evidence of any infarct. Bilateral carotid and vertebral spectral tracings were normal. Doppler sonogram shows low resistance waveform with continuous forward flow during systole. There is no evidence of any vertebral stenosis or atherosclerotic changes. Patient was also advised knee joint and LS spine X-ray and LS spine MRI for lower back pain with radicular pain for 3 months. Right knee AP and lateral skygram showing right knee joint and patellofemoral joint spaces are reduced significantly with subchondral sclerotic changes and erosion of end plates, more in the tibia. There is rare fraction of trabeculation seen which are suggestive of osteoporotic changes. The above findings are suggestive of grade 4 osteoarthritis. LS spine skygram AP and lateral view shows anterior marginal osteophytes with end plate sclerotic changes. Lateral view shows grade 2 enterolisthesis of L5 over S1 causing severe disc space narrowing. No evidence of any fracture. Bilateral SI joint shows reduced joint space and pelvic bones were normal. These are T1 and T2 MRI images showing L5-S1 disc herniation with grade 2 enterolisthesis of L5 over S1. Inferior end plate type 2 degenerative changes are seen in L5 vertebral body with mild loss of disc height. Vertebral disc desiccation and disc herniation are present at multiple levels. Axial T2 MRI sequences shows L5-S1 disc herniation indenting the ventral thecal sac causing compression of exiting L5 nerve roots bilaterally and impingement of traversing S1 nerve roots. Parasagittal T2 weighted MRI demonstrate a typical keyhole shaped L3, L4 neural phenomenon containing L3 nerve which is surrounded by a hyperdense fat. At L5-S1 level we can see there is a loss of this keyhole site. Now I would like to invite Dr. Diksha for further management.
As we are having a normal NCCT head and vertebral artery was normal, so we rule out the other causes like chronic SDH or vertebral insufficiency. So we rule out the chronic SDH and vertebral insufficiency. In the musculoskeletal causes, for the lumbar spondylosis, we did the MRI which is suggestive of lumbar spondyloenterolisthesis grade 2 and bilateral osteoarthritis knee grade 4.
So one more thing, like when you are talking about grade of anything, I mean you have to let the audience know ki what is grade 1, what is grade 4 or is it grade 5 or is it grade 10. You should have a table here tell us what is grade 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you can not describe the table but say that this is grade 2. Okay.
So these are the interesting factors for the recurrent fall. Extrinsic factor can be the cause of recurrent fall like environment. Environment factor include improper walking aid, illumination or poor lighting, and third one is the wet floor. As we saw in our first fall, patient is fall because of the wet floor. Along with the geriatric syndromes as we discussed earlier could be the cause of recurrent fall. So after the thorough clinical examination, history, investigation and imaging, we reached to final diagnosis of orthostatic hypotension, which is drug related in our case, with severe iron deficiency anemia, oral candidiasis, severe osteoporosis, polypharmacy with the potential inappropriate medication, moderate depression, hypertension, lumbar spondylolisthesis grade 2, bilateral osteoarthritis knee, malnourished, severe frailty and impaired functionality. So, for the management of orthostatic hypotension, which is drug related, so we gradually discontinue the drug prazosin and clonazepam and advise patient to increase water intake to 2.5 liters per day with the moderate salt intake of 5 to 6 grams per day and advise for the isometric exercises in further follow-up.
Why was she taking prazosin? Is she a hypertensive patient?
Yes, sir.
Use salt and lot of water and stop prazosin, and blood pressure will go up again.
Yes,
Was any alternative antihypertensive medication initiated?
Sir, no, not yet. Sir, because the पेशेंट इज हाइपोटेंशन, प्राजोसिन को लेने के बाद में भी उनका बीपी कम आ रहा था. इट कॉजेज कुड बी ड्यू टू एनीमिया ऑल्सो. So we correct that measure. At the time, patient is not requiring the medication in further follow-up.
I mean, in a person who's hypertensive,
Yes, sir.
stopping antihypertensive medication is not a good option. It should be substituted by other medications which are free of these side effects or have them to a lesser extent.
Yes, sir.
So that, I mean, you are otherwise inviting risks of things like intracranial bleeding or a stroke.
Yes, sir. So, in the sir, further follow-up on the after 20 days, we started the calcium channel blockers. For the management of severe iron deficiency anemia, we calculated the iron deficit that was 1215. So we gave injection iron ferrous carboxymaltose in 2 doses 1 week apart and advised for the increased iron rich food in the diet. For the management of oral candidiasis, we gave tablet fluconazole for 400 mg stat followed by 200 mg once a day for the 14 days, along with the local application of choline salicyclate for the pain relief and advice for the oral hygiene and betadine mouthwash. For the management of moderate depression, we gave tablet duloxetine 20 mg HS and treated the primary cause as in our case, patient is chronically bedridden and advice for the family involvement in form of emotional support, social support and communication. For the management of severe osteoporosis, we gave injection teriparatide 20 micrograms subcutaneously once a day was started and vitamin D and calcium supplementation was given and advice for the diet rich in calcium and vitamin D. Strength and aerobic exercises was planned for the next visit. For the polypharmacy and PIMs, we taper off the drug prazosin and clonazepam after 1 week. Diclofenac and etoricoxib was stopped. Prednisolone was gradually tapered off and pantoprazole was used with a caution. For the management of hypertension, we gradually tapered down the prazosin. Prednisolone was tapered down. Etoricoxib and diclofenac was stopped and advised for the moderate salt intake. Home BP charting was advised. Statin was started in the moderate intensity because of ASCVD score was 9.2%, suggestive of patient is a intermediate to high risk of atherosclerosis. For the management of lumbar spondylolisthesis grade 2, bilateral osteoarthritis knee, malnourished, severe frailty and impaired functionality, we need a multidisciplinary team approach. So I would like to invite Dr. Shuk from the Department of Orthopedics for the further surgical management in our patient.
So the patient was presented to us with the history of low back ache and radiating to lower limbs greater than left since 3 months, and the history of osteoarthritis right knee more than left since 2.5 years. And since the radiological findings also suggest that the patient is having heterolisthesis at the L5-S1 level and grade 4 osteoarthritis in the right knee, ideally the patient should have undergone surgical management, looking at the basic history and the x-rays. But the things are not generally that simple. The things are not generally black and white. As the title of the day suggests, it is all about colors of complexity. So today, if we look at the complexity out here, we have the patient with osteoporotic score of less than -1, and which suggests that the patient has poor bone quality. And if we undergo surgical management as far as this spine is concerned, then we can have risks like iatrogenic fracture, pseudoarthrosis, instrumentation failure, adjacent level disc degeneration and progressive kyphosis. Hence, it will be advised to continue the teriparatide management for 6 months and other rehabilitation measures in the patient like gradual strengthening and improvement of physical capacity so as to make the patient fit for surgery. Now coming to the osteoarthritis of knee. The patient is having osteoarthritis since last 2.5 years. Osteoarthritis along with osteoporosis, flexion deformity and weak extensor mechanism can create a terrible combination. And since the patient is already having osteoarthritis, osteoporosis and weak extensor mechanism, it will be a risky task to undergo a total knee arthroplasty in this particular patient, since we can face complications like periprosthetic joint infection, implant failure and inability to regain normal physical function. And hence, similarly, as in the case of spinal surgery, we should wait for at least 3 to 6 months by doing medical therapy and other prehab measures to take up the task of total knee arthroplasty. And hence the further plan will be to improve the osteoporotic status of the patient by gradual strengthening and mobilization, high protein and calcium rich diet and medical management. And hence we refer the patient back to the Department of Geriatric Medicine for the further plan of rehabilitation. Now I would like to invite Dr. Rekdara Mishra from the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehab for further management of the patient.
Good morning everyone, I'm Dr. Rekdara. So the patient was referred to us with history of recurrent fall and low back pain since past 3 months with bilateral knee pain since approximately 2.5 years. After a thorough musculoskeletal examination of the patient, we found that there were recurrent fall which was multifactorial due to orthostatic hypertension, anemia, osteoarthritic pain, weakness and instability. There was grade 4 bilateral knee osteoarthritis which presented with pain, restricted range of motion and impaired mobility. There was severe osteoporosis which increased risk of fractures especially during falls. There was grade 2 lumbar spondylolisthesis which added to pain, posture and gait issues. And lastly, due to prolonged inactivity and bed rest, patient had pressure sores of grade 1 and deconditioning. So a conservative rehabilitation protocol was prepared for this patient. Here in short-term plan, we did pain management, early mobilization and complication management. In mid-term plan, we improved mobility, did gait and balance training, mobility aid modification and caregiver education and training. In long-term plan, we advise for home modification to maximize independence in ADL, that is activity of daily living, and to improve quality of life of the patient. Let's discuss the short-term plan first, where our main goal was to initiate mobility gradually and safely. So in pain management, along with analgesics, heat modalities were given, where IFT, that is interferential therapy, was given for bilateral knee, whereas TENS, that is transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, was given for the back. In early mobilization, we specially focused for non-weight bearing in this case. So bed mobility training, rolling, bridging and supine to sitting was done. Supported transfers from bed to chair, passive and active assisted range of motion for hip, knee and ankle, isometric strengthening for quadriceps, gluteal muscles and hamstring muscles, and ankle pumps were taught to prevent DVT. So these exercises were taught to the patient here by our physiotherapist and then were carried out by local PTs at patient's hometown. In complication management, we emphasized on preventing further complications of immobility. So pressure ulcer care was taught by keeping skin clean and moisturized, through early repositioning and also by giving pressure relieving mattress. Coming to mid-term plan, mobilization was done by isometric strengthening of core abdominal and back muscles and balance training. In mobility aid, gait training was done with walker after controlling pain and slowly transiting it to quadruped cane of adequate height according to the patient. And lumbosacral belts were given to be used during traveling. Caregiver education and training was done regarding safe handling, assisted transfers and fall precautions. And ADL retraining was given for safe toileting, dressing, bathing along with reaches to the patient. Lastly, in long-term plan, home modifications were explained to the patient and their family regarding anti-slip flooring, grab bars, adequate lighting, education on safe walking techniques like posture, foot placement, step length and correct footwear usage along with use of assistive devices. Mobility and strengthening are planned with weight bearing exercises as tolerated by the patient in further follow-ups along with balance and proprioception. So now I would like to call Ms. Ritu Yadav from Department of Clinical Nutrition and Dietetics.
Can I just, you have described a very elaborate physiotherapy schedule for this patient. Bones are very weak is clear. I don't think we have had a formal assessment of her muscles, what the muscle strength. And repeatedly it was mentioned initially that at risk of sarcopenia. To me, this patient probably has severe sarcopenia, muscle size, muscle strength, muscle performance have not been formally assessed. Hand grip strength, knee extension strength, then you have other tools in which you would look at various other parameters of performance of the muscle, short physical performance battery, chair stand test, all those are objective measures. Until you have established the basic strength of the muscle is there, how can you start on aggressive rehabilitation exercises like leg pumps or resistance exercises? The patient is bedridden for 3 months, he can barely stand herself Do you think all this isometric core strengthening and all is possible in this patient?
So these plans were made, as I have said, it was divided into long-term, midterm and short-term plan. So they were divided into durations like 0 to 4 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks. So gradually we started it. We taught the patient so that they can at least try to do it at home, because the patient was living in their hometown. They could not come regularly to us. So these were taught by us according to the duration.
So you could, what stage could you achieve in them? Could you reach stage 4 when the patient is doing resistance exercises on her own, or you're still stuck at stage 1?
No,
You might advise it for 4 weeks and it will take much longer till the muscle recovers.
she's still in midterm plan, and we have taught her regarding home modifications in long-term plan. And the isometric strengthening, which I told, they are planning it for her next follow-up so that we can teach her.
Thank you, Dr. Ignara. Now I, Ritu Yadav, will be further discussing the nutritional management of the case. So, when patient was referred to us, the problems of nutritional concern was odynophagia and oral ulcers, severe iron deficiency anemia.
What was your background before PhD?
So, MSc in food and nutrition
From where?
from Agra University.
Was medically associated or
Sir,
independent course?
I've done a registered dietitian internship in clinical nutrition and dietetics, and after that I applied for PhD. The problems of nutritional concern was odynophagia and oral ulcer, severe iron deficiency anemia, dehydration, severe osteoporosis, and patient was at risk of sarcopenia, pressure sores, grade 1, and a subjected weight loss was also there. Nutritional assessment was done, and anthropometric measurement was showing that patient is falling in normal BMI range, but according to mini nutritional assessment short form score, which was 4 by 14, which suggested that patient is malnourished. Other nutritional diagnosis was done, and patient was found malnourished, anemic, sarcopenic, and osteoporotic. The goal of medical nutrition therapy was to improve food and water intake, to increase body weight, to increase muscle mass and muscle strength, to increase bone mineral density, to increase hemoglobin levels, and to treat pressure sores. The nutritional requirement was calculated by giving 30 kg per body weight calories, and the protein was given 13% of our total calories, and carbs was 16% and fat was 27%.
If the protein had been more,
Because you've got normally 1 to 1.5 gram per kilogram body weight is what you would recommend.
Yes, sir.
53 grams, isn't it a bit low here?
So because patient was old age person, so at her metabolic conditions was down, so we calculated it from by 1 kg per body weight. For normal population, we calculated it by 0.8 kg per body weight, but
So after having a multidisciplinary team approach, our final clinical synopsis would be, as in our case, patient has a recurrent fall for which she is bedridden from past 3 months, presented with a severe functional decline. Key problems was orthostatic hypotension, which is drug related, severe iron deficiency anemia, severe osteoporosis with a very high fracture risk, grade 4 osteoarthritis knee with a lumbar spondylolisthesis with a radiculopathy, oral candidiasis, moderate depression, polypharmacy and PIMs, grade 1 pressure sore, malnutrition, sarcopenia and severe frailty. So, we did a multidisciplinary team management. In the medical management, we gave iron replacement in the form of injection, antifungal therapy, tablet duloxetine with acetaminophen and tramadol if needed. Osteoporosis therapy, we gave calcium, vitamin D supplementation and teriparatide. For the rehabilitation, we advise patient range of motion and strengthening exercises and mobility aid as we discussed earlier, and advise for the safe transfer techniques and caregiver trainings. In the nutrition, we advise a high protein, micronutrient, hydration and moderate salt diet. So, her first progress review was done after 20 days and she improved in the form of dizziness and odynophagia. Her orthostatic hypotension was resolved, oral candidiasis was not present, and she is able to move 4 to 5 steps without support. Her hemoglobin was improved to 9.2 gram per dl, but still persistent with the lower back and knee pain and radicular pain. progress in the form of functional status, like in the basic activity of daily living, she is now able to do toilet herself and transport herself independently. In the IADL, independent activity of daily living, she is able to take her own medication. Her review was done after 64 days and she is improved. Now she can walk without support. She received the pneumococcal vaccine and her hemoglobin improved to 11.5 gram per dl, but with still persisting the radicular pain of 3 to 4. In the form of functional status, she is completely improved in the basic activity of daily living, and in the form of independent activity of daily living, she is able to use telephone, she helps her family members in food preparation, and she is doing laundry independently. Now, I would like to call Dr. Sunil sir for the further conclusion remarks.
So we started on parathormone,
Yes.
but could we have added denosumab, because the mechanism of action of both these drugs is entirely different and it becomes additive. And there have been reports and studies which suggest that giving a combination therapy would lead to much more substantial and early recovery in osteoporosis.
Yes, sir.
Although I have not tried, but
Yes.
wanted to know your opinion.
Sir, we went through NICE guideline, through the Canadian guideline and American guideline. All recommend only teriparatide in the first 18 to 24 months, and beyond that there is no evidence कि teriparatide improve करेगा. In that case, we add after that anti-resorptive therapy, and we didn't find any evidence in the any guideline that recommend कि दोनों drug एक साथ देना. So that's why we didn't give support.
This is the standard practice.
Yes.
Sequential treatment,
Yes.
2 years teriparatide, then you move to denosumab, and
Yes.
even after that you have only marginal
Yes.
1 or 2 points improvement in
Yes.
this. What doctor is saying, logically it makes sense because they have a different mechanism of action, and I'm sure there will be case reports. Here you need individualized treatment and not a guideline based. Guideline means you can't drop below that standard, but you can certainly improve over that standard and give better treatment as your patient's condition demands. So is there any objection to using both together?
Sir, that one thing that ki if the by any chance patient lost to follow and we stop denosumab, then can create a big problem and patient can cause osteoporosis at basically increased risk of osteoporosis. That's why,
As in when you start denosumab, even sequentially, this risk remains.
yes sir,
So you will only start this if you're very sure of good follow,
yes sir.
which seems to be happening in this case. Okay, thank you.
And sir, I would like to answer your the two questions. First is hypertension. You told ki you have to start medication. We called the patient after 15 days with close follow-up. And our hypothesis was that hypertension is due to pain medication. Patient was too NSAID and also on steroid. So which can cause hypertension, sir. And second thing, patient was not on basically salt restricted diet already. So we gave the moderate diet in spite of that's why we just decrease to the moderate 5 to 6 gram per day. And the second question, sarcopenia. In that, sir, basically what happened ki we are not able to perform the strength, performance and mass. Massively we need BMD or MRI, sir. So strength and performance we cannot assess because the patient is bedbound. But the tool that we used, that specificity is very high, sir. Sensitivity is very low, but specificity high. So that's why we kept
Which tool? SARCAP.
sarcopenia, sir.
SARCAP only tells you sarcopenia and it is the calf circumference. It is just a physical test. It doesn't test the
Yes, sir.
performance or the strength. And I think knee extension can be done in a bed-bound patient. And grip strength can be done in a bed-bound patient.
Yes, sir.
So those are simple tests of muscle strength and performance which one can do at the bedside.
But if would have been strength only, अगर हम सिर्फ strength चेक करते तो उसका कोई point नहीं था sir. Without checking performance, sir, and without checking BMD, bone mass. For diagnosing sarcopenia, we need at least two performance and strength or
Yes, the problems are very correctly pointed
Yes.
out that this is the situation. But if the patient is so weak that you can't even basically assess a basic muscle performance, then all the rigorous exercises that are being planned to strengthen the muscles appear impractical.
Yes, sir.
It may not be possible to implement those exercises if the patient is not even able to get up out of bed. That was my point.
And sir, till now already 3 months completed, but we haven't started any weight bearing exercise for the patient. We are doing just self weight exercises like Dr. Saab told. So with this, from this case, from this interesting case, we learned that falls are common in an older adult usually happen due to many reasons that can be intrinsic or extrinsic. And for that, we need comprehensive geriatric assessment. And we also saw that small steps, if taken with the multidisciplinary approach, can can make a frail patient into functional independent patient. And we should also consider every acute visit or every hospital visit for prevention through the osteoporosis screening, vaccination, cognitive screening, and intrinsic capacity domain assessment. And we all manage older adults, and we should always check all the medication before starting new one, so that we can prevent the prescription cascade and increase associated risk with it. And we must recognize that this geriatric is not limited to a area of medical management. We are a transformative, preventive, and provocative, holistic branch of medicine that deal with our older adults. With this, I would like to acknowledge the mentors and the supporting management to the CCA Review Committee, the Department of Medicine, Orthopedics, PMR, Radio Diagnosis and Dietitian team, and to the nursing officer and staff, and to the patient and family. Without this would have not been possible. Thank you so much. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.